Hello, in this video I'm going to go through a few problems from practice problem set 1-3. By the way, 1-3 and 1-2 are the practice problem sets that I used as models for homework assignment number 1. So your work on these practice problem sets should prepare you to do well on homework number 1. In this practice problem set, we're going to be identifying conclusions in arguments that are presented without premise introducers or conclusion introducers. Now, there are two approaches we can take in this kind of situation where no introducers are used. And one approach might work better for one person, another approach might work better for a different person, or which approach works better might depend on specific things about like how the example is presented or worded or something like that. But two approaches to use. One very simple one would be to think in terms of adding an introducer in a way that keeps the arguer's intended meaning the same. I think of therefore as the model or paradigm of a conclusion introducer, and I think of the word because as the model or paradigm of a premise introducer. So if I can add one of those in a way that clearly keeps the intended meaning, that doesn't change that, that will help me find the conclusion. Another thing is to think just in terms of the definition of an argument. An argument is a set of statements in which some, the premise or premises, are intended to be reasons to believe another, which is the conclusion. So you can ask yourself, well, of the different statements that are made here, which is the author or the arguer trying to give reasons to believe? Or which is the arguer trying to support? The one that they're trying to give reasons to believe or that they're trying to support, that will be the conclusion. All right, let me start with number 1, which says, mountain lions are not built for extreme cold and deep snow. They have short hair, relatively little body fat, and small paws, given their considerable weight. First, let me think in terms of adding an introducer here. There really is no place that I could add the word therefore and have something that makes sense or that keeps the arguer's meaning the same here. But if I add the word because in the place where the colon is, right after the word snow, it will clearly make sense and it will clearly keep the meaning the same. Then it would read as follows. Mountain lions are not built for extreme cold and deep snow. Why should we believe that? Well, because they have short hair, relatively little body fat, and small paws, given their considerable weight. So the conclusion here would be that first statement, mountain lions are not built for extreme cold and deep snow. Let me turn now to number 2 after reclaiming my chair from my cat. Although now he's sitting behind me on it. Doesn't matter. Number 2 says, prejudice is sinful. All blood flows red. In case you don't quite get what the arguer is trying to get across with that second statement, all blood flows red, I would take that to mean something like we're all the same under the surface or underneath the skin. Well, would it make more, here's a question to ask yourself. Do you think it would make more sense or better preserve the arguer's meaning to add because or therefore between those two statements? Prejudice is sinful, therefore all blood flows red? I don't think that makes any sense. But prejudice is sinful because all blood flows red seems to me to make sense and to preserve the arguer's meaning. In other words, all blood flows red is being used here to try to support the statement that prejudice is sinful. So that tells us that that first statement is the conclusion. Okay. I'll turn now to number 7, which says, the streets of Tokyo make no sense, laid out in the feudal days when roads were designed to confuse invading armies. Because of the way this is written, I can't really just insert the word because or the word therefore in here. So let me think about this a little differently. Is any reason given to try to support the idea that the streets of Tokyo make no sense? Well, yes. The streets of Tokyo, the roads, were designed to cause confusion. Now I'm pulling that little bit out of the part after the comma that says out in feudal days when roads were designed to confuse invading armies. But the roads were designed to cause confusion. That's the reason that's being given here to try to support the conclusion that the streets of Tokyo make no sense. All right, now let me turn to number 9. I gave you a note here that you really do need to read to understand this passage. The speaker here is a Catholic priest named Father Walsh, and he's the priest of the church that the author, Rosemary Bray, attended when she was a girl. Here she's relating something that happened when she was a child. She had wanted to help serve Mass like her younger brother, who was an altar boy. And she'd asked the priest if she could do so. Here's his answer to her question. You cannot serve Mass, Rosemary. You are a girl, and girls do not serve Mass. Well, let's think this one through. He's made 3 statements. First, Rosemary cannot serve Mass. Second, that she's a girl. And third, that girls do not serve Mass. What he's trying to do is justify denying her permission to serve Mass. And what reasons does he give for believing that she cannot do that? Because she's a girl and girls do not serve Mass. Another way to think of this is notice that he doesn't give any reason to believe that she's a girl. He simply states that without support. In other words, he simply asserts it. And the same thing is true for his statement that girls do not serve Mass. He doesn't try to support that or justify that or give any reason to believe it. So it could not be a conclusion. His conclusion is that Rosemary cannot serve Mass. All right, let me move now to number 10, and I also gave you a note to give you some context to help you understand this. This was a letter to the editor of the LA Times that was written in 2005. Now, it's important to understanding this passage to recognize that in 2005, same-gender marriage was not legally recognized in any part of this country other than the state of Massachusetts, and it was very controversial. The Catholic Church was one of the most powerful organizations that opposed the legal recognition of same-gender marriage at that point in the history of the United States. The letter writer here says the following: "It's utter lunacy to have the Catholic Church, inextricably mired in one of the most abysmal and systematic histories of child abuse, covered up for years, now trying to dictate who should and shouldn't be allowed to marry." One difficulty in understanding the argument in this passage is that there's one statement that's been broken into 2 fragments with something else interjected in between. So let me take those 2 fragments and put them back together again. That would read as follows: "It's utter lunacy to have the Catholic Church now trying to dictate who should and shouldn't be allowed to marry." Well, let's ask ourselves, is the letter writer here trying to give any reasons to believe that? Yes. because the Catholic Church was inextricably mired in one of the most abysmal and systematic histories of child abuse that it covered up for many years. He intends that as a reason for believing it's utter lunacy to have the Catholic Church now trying to dictate who should and shouldn't marry. So let me write that as the conclusion. Okay, now let me just quickly notice that what we're doing here is identifying conclusions of arguments. In recognizing an argument as an argument, and in identifying its parts, we are not saying anything about whether the argument is good or bad. That's a matter of argument evaluation, and we have to do the task of identifying an argument, its conclusion, and later in Chapter 1, its premises, before we can turn to the task of argument evaluation. So there may be some arguments, particularly in 1-3, the conclusions of which you disagree with or premises of which you disagree with. That wouldn't surprise me, given that a couple of them have to do with particular moments in U.S. Catholic history in particular. But again, evaluation of an argument, determining whether it's good or bad, is a separate matter from identifying an argument and its parts. And we'll wait until Chapter 2 to turn to argument evaluation. I hope this has been helpful for you. Be sure and ask me any questions that you might have, and I'll talk to you again soon. So long for now.